fMRI neurofeedback is a form of biofeedback training in which information about brain activity is given to participants in real time. With that feedback, participants learn to identify and modify their brain activity levels. Decoding neurofeedback is a novel approach for fMRI neurofeedback. Here, participants not only try to achieve a specific brain activity level, but also a multivariate activity pattern. A multivariate pattern representing one of the key brain states that a machine learning model was trained to discriminate. The more similar induced patterns are to that target pattern, the larger is the feedback that participants will receive. Here, we use decoding neurofeedback to study semantic domain. Learning a word involves mapping perceptual representations to lexical representations. By repetition, we end up by linking together the word to these perceptual representations. In this process, we need a conscious access to visual word reference so that semantic association can be established. But can we bypass this process? Can we create a new word meanings without an explicit perception of the referent? This is what our study is about. The first step of this experiment consists on training a machine learning model. We present 18 participants to pictures of two stimuli categories, dogs and scissors. For each participant, we train a probabilistic model to differentiate between class patterns in bilateral fusiforms. These regions belong to the semantic network and can be consciously controlled to match specific perceptual representations. Prior decoded neurofeedback studies use standard logistic regression models, but from our experience, these models tend to produce highly bimodal and overconfident predictions. This may hinder learning because feedbacks won't have enough variance, so participants discriminate the real quality of their performance. Moreover, these models don't take into account the wide representational space that a participant might explore, nor the potential impact of out-of-distribution data during neurofeedback. To mitigate these problems, we develop a new classifier with TensorFlow. Our decoder is composed of an input and a softmax output layers. We use binary cross-entropy loss as the loss function, which allow us to include soft labeling. In other words, labels that can be 0, 0.5, and 1. The 0.5 probabilistic label was associated with noisy samples. These were obtained by presenting participants to visual noise patterns during perceptual runs. With that, we were able to obtain a more representative representational gradient from one category to another. Moreover, by training our model in this way, we made it less sensitive to noise and allow for better class discrimination in the neurofeedback training. With our model already trained, we make participants take part on 4 neurofeedback training sessions in consecutive days. So they remain unaware of the experimental goals, we make them to believe that they were participating in a different experiment. With this training, we wanted to create an unconscious association between the perceptual patterns of dogs with a meaningless symbol. During neurofeedback training, we expose participants to the symbol and require them to manipulate their brain activity to increase monetary rewards. These rewards were bound to probability of activity patterns match representations of perceived dogs. In this regard, we found that participants progressively learn to evoke perceptual patterns of dogs in our target ROI. This is an important result that we attribute to our new decoder. Previous decoding neurofeedback studies using the standard logistic regression don't reveal these learning dynamics. Whole brain analysis showed indeed that target class decoding probabilities were higher in bilateral fusiform gyrus, lingual gyrus, and precuneus. All these regions were related to mental simulation of perceptual representations. Lastly, we test the neurofeedback training impact in a behavioral evaluation. Participants perform a visual search task. In this task, 2 pictures, one from each category, were precued by the incepted or by a control hiragana never present before. Then, a letter indicating the target category appears and participants have to indicate where the matching picture was present, whether it was in the left or in the right. Our hypothesis was that if representations were actually incepted to the hiragana, the presentation of the incepted hiragana might facilitate the perception of the corresponding visual category when compared to control hiragana. No reliable effects were found in visual search latencies precued by the incepted symbol. However, differences were found between processing of dogs and scissors. At this moment, we are analyzing potential neural difference between processing of the incepted versus control hiragana trials and whether individual learning coefficients during inception are related to the behavioral effect. So far, neurofeedback pipelines were really close and complex to run. However, we decided to create our own and simplify it for everyone. We create pyDecNef, an open Python framework for real-time fMRI decoded neurofeedback. To close these presentations, we want to invite you to follow our project by accessing from this link.